Hey, what's going on? My name's Andrew, you can call me Pooch, and I'd like to welcome you to the Less Lonely channel. I'm really glad you're here. I have to jump on a plane at 7 a.m., which means I have to wake up around 5:30, and it is currently 10 o'clock, so I have very little time to sleep. So we're not going to waste any time diving into today's video. Recently, I put together a video talking about my latest camera obsession, which is the Fuji X100V. I love the thing. And while the video did well for me, I did get one comment that made me pause, laugh, and then reconsider kind of just my current obsession. Photographer and videographer Patrick Tomasso left a comment on my video that said, "Great video, I hate this camera." And like, first things first, if you don't follow Patrick on Twitter, please do. He's hilarious, and obviously follow him on YouTube because he's incredibly talented. So when he left that comment, I was obviously intrigued. I said, "Yo, what's the deal? Why don't you like it?" And he didn't respond, and that's totally fine. So I took matters into my own hands and started doing research on the cons around the X100V. And wondering, am I just blinded by the hype that I had for this camera? So in today's video, we're gonna look at those cons, I'm gonna address them with my opinions and my experiences, and then I'm gonna explain to you what it's been like using this camera 1 month later. This video is gonna be extremely helpful for you if you're interested in buying an X100V, buying into the Fuji family, or just curious about more opinions in your decision-making process. So here he is, the X100V, my sweet, sweet little friend. And you might be wondering to yourself, what is there to hate about a camera so adorable, tiny, and cool looking too, right? Well, I found some things, actually 3 things that stuck out literally in every YouTube video or blog post that I read that I want to talk about today. The very first thing I noticed when people were discussing the X100V was its battery life. Now, if we look at the battery, let's get this guy out here, we can see it's not the largest battery. And because of that, obviously we're gonna run into some limitations. I saw in some blog posts that people were saying that the battery would just kind of die out on them like early on, like they'd go out for the day to shoot and it'd be dead like by noon, and that was like just regular shooting. I also saw some people say that the battery started out really strong like when they first got the camera, but the more they used it and longer they had it, it started to fall off and kind of underperform. The specs on this battery say that it's rated for about 350 photos if you're using the electronic viewfinder and 420 photos if you're using the optical viewfinder. You know, one thing I'll say about this that I did have a kind of a weird experience when I first got this camera was that when I first got it, it came with the charging cable but no charging brick or no external charger. So I kind of just threw it on an Apple brick and hoped that it would charge. It didn't. And actually, like, the only way I was able to charge this thing was by plugging it into my computer, which is just ridiculous. I spent like $14 and got the external charger, and that solved my problem, though I do think they should have included that in the box. The second thing I've heard and seen about the X100V is that people are not happy at all with it being an upgrade from the X100F and just the X100 line. Now, I can't speak into that fully because this is my first Fuji. I haven't owned any other Fujis before. But it's really easy to look up some specs and see what people were dealing with maybe the OG X100, the X100F, and then the X100V. So the X100 started off at a whopping 12 megapixel crop sensor that shot at 5 frames per second. This was 2010, so that was good, I guess, at the time. I wasn't shooting photos at that point. The X100F, which was the third camera in the line, came out at 24 megapixels at a crop sensor and shot at 8 frames per second. So I'd say that's a lot better. Now here's where things get a little dicey. You see, the X100V came out and it was a 26 megapixel crop sensor that shot at 11 frames per second. So larger, faster, but only by so much. The leap from the X100 to the X100F was significant. The leap from the F to the V, I can see where people would be disappointed. And the last point that I came across from my sweet little buddy was that people were not happy with the price. At $13.99, that is by no means cheap. Looking at the OG X100 that came out in 2010, it was $1,199. The X100F came out in 2017, and that was $1,299. And then the V at $13.99 came out in 2020. Now, I do want to make the point that there are other cameras that were in the line between X100 and then the X100F. I believe we're working with the X100S and the X100T. And the thing is that all three of those cameras stayed the same price over the years. And so I can see why people might be frustrated if it was a marginal upgrade and they added another $100 onto the price point. So now you're probably wondering, what are my thoughts on the criticisms, the cons, the things that people are not happy about? Well, first off, I just need to say that it's important to criticize everything that we find valuable. Criticism helps us keep brands and things accountable, and it also helps us kind of get in the right headspace when it comes to gear. That this is a tool in order to help us achieve an end goal. It's not going to make things magically better if it has more dollars on it, or even if it has more settings sometimes. In my response to the battery issues, I will say I walked around Portland for a full week, whether it be downtown, on the coast, up in an airplane. And this guy went with me everywhere I went. And not only was it with me, but it was like on. I had it on because I was shooting regularly. And I'll say that I only charged it like once or twice during that full week time frame. I came home with far more than 350 photos, so you do the math here. Right now, the battery's holding up fantastic. And this might seem like a really stupid, simple trick to help save the battery, but while you're walking around, just turn it off. Like, I know it's scary because the uptime might feel long, but on this guy, it's quick. I didn't miss any moments, really. For con number two, the upgrade issue, I told you, I can't comment on the other cameras because I never owned them. My friend Keith had an X100 and he loved it, and he saw this camera and he also liked this one. It all feels good. So even though I can't comment on those cameras, I can comment on the law of diminishing returns. There's a certain threshold that like all gear in any hobby or interest meets where it's kind of past a certain dollar point that things won't always just get better. Like clearly going from 12 megapixels to 27, 28 megapixels is a huge jump. No one's arguing that. But 24 to 28 megapixels, how much better could it actually be? And that's the whole idea about the law of diminishing returns, is that things get marginally better the more expensive they get. And I think that does apply to cameras. I think that if I had the X100F, I'd be slower to pull the trigger on this guy. And finally, let's talk about price. Remember when I told you to follow Patrick on Twitter? Well, here's a reason why. Recently, Fuji released another camera that was around $5,000, and Patrick took to Twitter immediately and said this: let's stop calling $5,000 cameras affordable. Now, I know the X100V does not come anywhere close to being that expensive, but I think the sentiment remains true. I think it's incredibly easy to see people talking about cameras on YouTube, especially photographers and videographers that we respect. And we look at ourselves and we go, look, they have this camera, they're good. That must mean that if I get this camera, I'm going to be good. I just want to get this out in the air. $1,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. That could be a car payment, that could be your mortgage or rent, that could be an unexpected hospital bill. You just never know. So listen, let's not take $1,000 for a piece of equipment as just like pocket change on a rainy day. When you're looking at buying gear and investing in your hobby, craft, or profession, it's really important to know your own limits. What can I afford? What does make sense? And in reality, will it actually make me better? So you're probably wondering now, I'm talking about this, but did I buy this at full price? Because if I did, it kind of diminishes all of those points I just made. Well, you'll be happy to know that I didn't pay full price for this, and actually I spent a lot of time lurking on eBay trying to find the best deal. You see, with this camera specifically, I think it's a little deceiving externally. I mean, if you look at the thing, right, it's got two knobs, an on-off switch, your shutter, one lens that doesn't come off. It screams simplistic, and sometimes we can confuse simplicity with ease of use, and I think that's where some people got tripped up when they bought this camera. In the back of my mind, I thought to myself, if I wait around long enough, I'm gonna see this camera up for sale on eBay because somebody bought this and they realized it's a lot more than they thought. They don't need it, they don't want it, they don't use it, and so they're gonna put it up for a loss and maybe make up some money and ultimately buy a cheaper camera. Look, maybe that's a false narrative in my head, maybe I've made that all up, but getting this camera used on eBay for sub $900 with no issues? Come on, spend some time, buy used. It's good for the planet too, right? So, after looking at all of the cons and using this camera as my daily driver for 1 month, I can safely say that a month later, the X100V is still amazing. I love it. Sorry, Patrick. I think you're wrong. You know what? Prove me wrong. Tell me and show me why this camera sucks. Why you hate it. Because I still haven't found a reason why. Hey, maybe I'm naive. Maybe a month isn't long enough to know if I actually love a camera. But as of right now, if you can get this thing used, if you can be patient, if you can find it, get your hands on it, you're gonna love it. It's great. I love it. And there you have it, the Fuji X100V 1 month later. Let me know what you think. Did the cons kind of dissuade you from buying this camera, or did my experience and my response to those cons maybe encourage you to start looking on eBay for a used version of this camera? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for helping me feel less lonely on my creative journey. If you want to feel less lonely on your creative journey, then I'd recommend leaving a like, dropping a comment, and ultimately subscribing to the Less Lonely channel so we can be creative together and feel less lonely. Now, I definitely need to go to bed because 5 a.m. is coming quick. Oh man. Peace.